So we continue with the introduction to halachic literature. We spoke about the Midrash Halacha, Midrash Haggadah, the Midot HaTorah Nidreshet B'hem, the tools with which the rabbis interpret the text, because that was the introduction by itself to Midrash Halacha. There's much more to say about Midrash Haggadah, but I'm doing it as this course is introductory, so we're opening the doors, and people are welcome to study more and more Midrash and Midrash Haggadah, Midrash Halacha, to get to know the text well. But today we're going to talk about the Mishnah. So the Mishnah, I think the image that most people have when they think of the Mishnah is of organization of material. This is what Rabbi Nasi set out to do when he wrote the Mishnah, or when he compiled the Mishnah. And the Mishnah is actually organized by units called the Seder, the orders of the Mishnah. So that conveys the idea that you want to organize the material that is available in an orderly manner, in a thematic manner. So there are 6 orders of the Mishnah. We could see them when we go to, even on Sefaria, we could see that. If I go to Sefaria and I click on, seeing the Mishnah, I will see here. 1 second, it's jump Mishnah. So we have 6 orders. The first order is, let's switch to English. The first order is Seder Zera'im. Then you have Moed, Nashim, Nezikin, Kodashim, and Teharot. So, and in each of these Sdarim that is organized by a theme, we have tractates that correspond to the theme of that order. And each one of these masechtot, it's called masechet, tractate. Masechet in the biblical Hebrew, masechet means woven fabric. The fabric before you remove the fabric from the loom, it's called masechet. So the ideas of text that is being woven together into a coherent text, and in turn, each one of these masechtot, for example, masechet brachot, is divided into chapters. Masechet Brachot, for example, has 9 chapters. Each chapter is divided into Mishnayot. So you have the overall structure of the Mishnah is order, tractate, chapter, and Mishnah, individual Mishnah. Later on, Maimonides took the more or less the same structure, where he created the Mishneh Torah, and he organized his work by books. He has 14 books. Each book is divided to halachot on certain topics. Each halacha is divided to chapters, and within the chapters you have individual units also called halachot. So let's just look first generally on the orders and what each one of them contains. So the first order is Seder Zera'im. Zera'im literally means seeds. So that order is supposed to organize all the laws that have to do with agriculture. The first Masechet is Brachot, which has to do with prayers. It's not directly related to agriculture. So this is one example of how, when you organize material, there will always be some odds and ends that don't perfectly fit into one category. So you have to squeeze them in somehow. This is the miscellaneous section. Try to organize any set of given objects or words by certain categories. You will find things that defy categorization. So Berachot is one of them. The other Masechtot in this tractate deal with the laws of agriculture. Pe'ah, the corner of the field. Demai, what happens if you have fruits or vegetables that you're in doubt whether the tithes have been taken off or not. Kil'aim, if two seeds were sowed together. Shvi'it, the laws of the 7th year. Trumot, the laws of the gifts to the Kohen. Ma'asrot, the 10% that is given to the Kohen and to the Levi. Ma'aser Sheni, the 10% that belongs to the owner. Hala, separation of hala from the dough. Also, this is not directly agrarian work; it's more at home, but because it has to do with the grains that grow in the ground, it is filed under Zeraim. Then we have Orla, which is the law of the 3 years. The fruit during the first 3 years is prohibited. You cannot eat it. You can only eat it in the 4th year. And Bikurim, bringing the first fruit. So Berachot, like I said, is put in at the head of this Seder Zaim as the first Masechet. Mainly, it speaks about the blessings in the Tefillah, Kriyat Shema, the Amidah, and only one chapter is dedicated to the Berachot that you say for fruits and vegetables. So it doesn't really belong here, but as I said, it didn't belong in any of the other orders either. So the author of the Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda felt that it is appropriate to put it here with all the other brachot, all the other tracts that deal with agriculture. Already, when you look at this order, you see that it's not as orderly as we would have wanted it to be. If you notice that when I read about the Ma'asrot, right, there are the gifts that you give to the Kohen, right, or to the poor. These there are 6 masechtot that deal with that: Pe'ah, Demai, Trumot, Ma'asrot, Ma'aser Sheni, and you could say also Hala and Bikurim, but they're not in order. We would have wanted to see an order within the of the tractates, within the order that corresponds to the way you give those the way you give those portions of the field to the poor or to the Kohen and the Levi. So you should have started with Pe'ah because that's the corner of your field while harvesting. It should continue with the laws of Ma'asrot because that's that is the 10% that you give to the Kohen and the Levi. Sorry, Trumot, this one, and then Ma'asrot. Then Ma'aser Sheni because it's the secondary Ma'aser given to the owner. Then it should go to Demai, which here is the 3rd, because Demai speaks about a case of doubt. Whether after we've learned the laws of Ma'asrot, it tells you what do you do if you have some grain that you separate Ma'asrot from and some that you don't know. Then we would go to the laws of Kilaim, hybrid plants, Orla and Bikurim, because those are about what you plant and how you treat it. Shvi'it, which is how to rest from agrarian work on the 7th year, and then maybe Hala, and afterwards Brachot. Or we could have organized it differently, but that is not an ideal order. So why is it organized in that way? There have been the same question was raised not only regarding that order. I'll show you another order. Seder Moed, okay? Moed is about the holidays. So Shabbat and holidays. It starts with 2 tractates that are related to Shabbat. One is Shabbat in general, but even though it speaks about Shabbat, the majority of this tractate is dedicated to the issue of carrying or taking from one domain to another, which has to do with Eruvin. And then we have another Masechet called Eruvin that talks about the laws of how to build an Eruv and which place can have an Eruv, etc. Then we have Masechet Psahim, which makes sense because this is the first holiday of the year, right? In the Hebrew calendar, the year starts with Psahim. Sorry, it opened it up. You start with Psahim. Then we have Shkalim, which is the collection of the coins for the census that was conducted on during the month of Adar, before Nisan, then Yoma, which is about Yom Kippur, then Sukkah, Sukkot, Beitzah, or as some people call it originally, Masechet Yom Tov, that deals with the laws of Yom Tov in general, Rosh Hashanah, I need to open it, Rosh Hashanah, Ta'anit, which are the fast days, Megillah, which is about Purim, Moed Katan, which speaks about Hol HaMoed, and Hagigah. So I think here the lack of order is clearer. What would be the correct order for this order, for the order of Moed, if we talk about the holidays? It seems like it starts off correctly. It starts with Shabbat. Shabbat, okay, right in the beginning. Eruvin should also should follow Shabbat, because we talk about Echot Shabbat. But what should be the next Masechet? What would you, can I get some votes on what would be the next tractate after Shabbat and Eruvin? Which should come next? I'm reading again all of them. The laws of Pesach, the census with the coins before Pesach, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, Yom Tov, Rosh Hashanah, fast days, Purim, Hol HaMoed, and the sacrifices brought on Hol HaMoed.
Yom Tov, maybe?
Yom Tov, maybe, right? Because we're going to talk about the laws of Yom Tov in general. Those are the general laws of Yom Tov that apply to all holidays. And after Masechet Yom Tov, we should have Masechet Moed Katan that talks about the laws of Hol HaMoed. That again applies to both Pesach and Sukkot.
Could Eruvin come before Shabbat?
What?
Could the second we talk about the Erev come before
right.
Shabbat?
Actually, you're right, Katriel. Eruvin should come before Shabbat, because the setting up the Eruv and building it cannot be done on Shabbat. So this is all preparatory, right? So even there, we should have done Eruvin and Shabbat. The following the laws of Yom Tov and of Hol HaMoed, we should have Hagigah, because it speaks about the sacrifices brought on Hol HaMoed. Then we should have the holidays in order. Pesach. There's no tractate dedicated to Shavuot, so we should have about Pesach. Then the next one after Pesach is Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot. Then we should bring Ta'anit, general fast days. Sorry, not Ta'anit, Megillah, Purim, then Ta'anit, general fast days, and then Shekali. Maybe, we could play with it around, but obviously this is not a logical order. Okay, as they say in Yiddish, weiter. Let's move on to the next. This is really Yiddish, by the way. I'm not kidding you. It's not Arabic or anything. It is. So weiter, you go to Seder Nashim, the laws of women and marital laws, family laws, etc. So what do we have here? Yevamot, the Levirate law, which are the laws of a woman whose husband passed away. They have no children, and now in order to fulfill the Levirate law, she has to marry or get a chalitza from her brother-in-law. So this is the first tractate. The second one is Ktubot, the document signed between the bride and groom before the wedding. Then we talk about Nedarim, vows. Why are vows included in Seder Nashim? Because in the Torah, the way the laws of vows are presented, they allow the husband or the father to have some kind of authority over a woman when she does a neder. So there is a tangential connection to the order of laws of women, and just like the case of brachot, it is a masechet that doesn't fall under any clear category. So we just stick it there. Yes.
Why Yevamot is before Shabbat?
We didn't get to the order yet. You're right. I'm just going over the names, but you're right. It's a good question. Nazir is the laws of the Nazirite, the person who decides to take upon himself a vow of Nazirut. Has nothing to do with women, but is connected to Nedarim, vows. So they were put together. Sota is the deviate woman, which apparently is connected to Seder Nashim, a woman who's suspected by her husband of having an affair, and he brings it to court. but it also follows the order of the Torah because first Nazir is mentioned and then the Sotah. Then we have the laws of divorce and then the laws of marriage. So Shai already pointed out that Yevamot, the laws of a widow who lost her husband and now has to marry the brother-in-law, shouldn't come first, right? So if we do this exercise here again, what should be the first tractate?
Kiddushin.
Before Kiddushin?
Vows.
No, what? Shai, what are you saying? Ketubot, yes. Alex, you're right. Kiddushin should be the first, but before that, Ketubot, because you write the Ketubah and then you do the Kiddushin, right? Then what? Nedarim, vows, maybe should come there because they happen during marriage. But really, it's not something that has to do with women only, so they shouldn't be there. So it should have been Kiddushin, Ketubot, first the Ketubah, Kiddushin, marriage, Gitin, divorce, which are more common than Yevamot, the Levirate law, which is carried out when one of the brothers dies without a child. And then Nedarim, Nazir, Sotah, maybe as a unit. So this is really, this is perplexing because we see like in almost every order, glaring problems of lack of order. So we have to figure it out. Yes. Yeah.
Are you asking in terms of linear organization? Because the way that I'm seeing to organize it, wow, the echo is awful. The way that I'm
Alex,
seeing to
your mic is
organize
open. 1 second. No, my.
Okay, the way that I'm seeing to organize it is not linear. It's more cyclical in terms of the whole section revolves around vows that are given or vows that are reneged on, or the fallout and the consequences of giving a vow. So it would seem to me that Nedarim would be in the center, and then Ketubot and Kedushin would sort of revolve around that, and also Nazir. And then on the outside would be Yevamot and then Sotah and Gitin, because they're sort of a fallout. So I see it more in a circle, if it matters.
It's interesting, could be, but even if you see this as a cycle, as a cyclical structure, it wouldn't be the perfect one, right? You should have one in the middle. But since the text usually goes in Mishnah, people do study it in a linear fashion, would have made sense to have them follow chronological order. But okay, I hear the possibility, but that's why I'm pointing out in every order, because this is the thing when we present a list of questions, we want to find a theory that answers all of them and not just one particular case. Seder Nezikin, and Seder Nezikin, which means Nezikin is damages, the laws of damages, some monetary laws. We have Bava Kama, Bava Metzia, and Bava Batra, which literally translate as the first gate, the middle gate, and the last gate. The word Bava in Aramaic means door. Like in Arabic, Bab al-Wad or Fatah al-Bab. So the word Bava means a gate, a door. And it's divided, so it's really a generic name. It's part 1, part 2, part 3. No particular name for the tract, and they deal with the laws of damages. And there are a lot of Bava Kama, laws of damages, Bava Metzia, laws of found objects, interest, racketeering, meaning manipulating the prices, purchases, acquisitions. Bava Batra is about laws of neighbors and documents. There are a lot of laws that have to do with monetary issues are squeezed into those 3 tractates. You could say that all these 3 tractates deal with monetary issues, from damages, neighbors, acquisitions, etc. Sanhedrin are the laws of the judicial system, how you establish the judicial system. Makot, the laws of administering lashes, who deserves lashes, etc. Shavuot, the laws of vows and oaths, unlike the vows that were mentioned in in Seder Nashim, those are oaths given in the Bedin. Iduyot is, we would think it's about the laws of witnesses, but actually it's a collection of testimonies given by the rabbis regarding certain halachot. But each one said, those are the halachot that I've heard from my masters. They gathered them all together. Avodah Zarah are the laws of idolatry, meaning of the prohibition to worship idols. Pirkei Avot, the teachings of the sages, and Horayot, what do we do in case the Bedin, the leaders of the nation, made a mistake and caused people to commit a transgression? Here also, we would have thought that probably the first Masechet to open the order would be Sanhedrin, the laws of the judicial system. Then maybe the laws of damages and monetary issues, lashes, oaths, and horayot, which of course this has to do with the bedin, and then at the end the two miscellaneous aduyot that have to do with is a gathering of, or you could say an anthology of testimonies by the rabbis about halachot from all over the halachic spectrum. And Pirkei Avot, moral teachings. Why is Pirkei Avot in Seder Nezikin? A nice idea is that is a statement in the Talmud. If you want to be a pious person, if you want to be a righteous person, you have to learn the laws of damages. Or in other words, the greatest moral and ethical teaching is respect the property and rights of others, and that's why they put it together in Seder Nezikin. Okay, then we go to Seder Kodashim, the laws of Kodashim, things that are sanctified, dedicated to the temple. Zvahim, sacrifices in general. Menachot, sacrifices of flour and flour, wine, oil that are not animals. Hulin, the laws that pertain to preparation of food, not in the temple, so slaughtering, etc. Bechorot, the laws of the firstborn that is dedicated to the temple. Arachin, when one dedicates his own value to the temple. Tumura, when one, if you, for example, dedicate a sacrifice and then you change your mind and say, no, I want this to be in lieu of that sacrifice. You want to exchange one animal for another. What happens then? Kritot, the laws of karet, what transgressions carry the punishment of karet. Me'ilah, the laws of embezzlement or corruption. What happens if one uses the temple property without permission? Tamid is about the sacrifice of the daily korban. Midot, the measurements of the temple. Kinim is about the nests of two birds that people would bring as a sacrifice. And most of Masechet Kinim is theoretical. What happens if you brought two nests, one with the white birds, one with the black birds, and they got mixed together? It's really it's a field day for abstract mathematicians. I have a friend who wrote a whole book on kinim, but I cannot read. I'll share it with you if you want. It's really mostly abstract math there. Here also, if I would organize this tractate in order, I would start with Hulin, the laws of slaughtering in general, then go to Zevahim, which is the korbanot slaughtered for in the temple, and then all the other animals that are being korban, mechorot and tmura. Maybe we'll do tamid and midot because they talk about the measurements of the temple and the daily korbanot, and bring the rest at the end. But again, here the order is not perfect. And finally, Seder Tahorot. Seder Tahorot, which means purities and impurities. We have kelim, which utensils can or cannot become tameh. Ohalot, in what case if you have an impurity that has to do with the dead body or the dead body itself, if it is under one roof with another thing, how do you handle it? And the one roof doesn't mean only that the dead body and myself are in the same room, but also if there is an extension. For example, let's say that this is the branch of a tree, there's a fence in the middle, a dead body is here, and I'm standing here. I'll be tameh because the same object covers both of us, even though there are separations. There are very complicated laws in this Masechet Ohalot. Negaim, laws of leprosy, para, of the red heifer, taharot, the laws of purity in general, mikvaot, the laws of the mikveh, nida, the laws of nida, family purity, machshirin, what makes something eligible to become tameh, and it has to first come in contact with a certain liquid. Zavim, the laws of people who have sexually transmitted diseases. Tevul Yom, the laws of a person who went to the mikveh but is not going to be tahor until the end of the day. Yadaim, the laws of the purity of your hands after you wash them, when you wash them, how can they make other things tameh? And finally, Oktzin, which speaks about the stems of fruits and vegetables, how they become tameh, which is this last one is considered a very, very difficult masechet. There's a story related to this Masechet Oktzin. It says that two rabbis rebelled against Rabban Gamliel and wanted to remove him. There was a lot of tension around him, so they decided to tackle him with a question from this last Masechet Oktzin. Apparently, nobody knew. Nobody was very well familiar with this tractate, and so they planned to ask him publicly and embarrass him and make him retire or resign. One of his students learned of the plot, but he didn't want to be a telltale on the other rabbis. So he went and he sat behind the rabbi and studied this tractate out loud. So the rabbi paid attention to him, says, what's going on? So he understood that there is a recommendation that he studies this tractate. And indeed, those two rabbis, Rabbi Natan and Rabbi Meir, came to tackle the rabbi with a question, and he was well prepared. But then they kicked him out of the Beit Midrash. So, it's like a rabbinical coup d'etat that failed. And from that day on, instead of calling them by name, Rabbi Natan and Rabbi Meir, they say, Acherim Omrim, other people say, because they still needed their wisdom. In any case, we went very briefly over all these Mishnayot, all the names and description of what they are. When you watch the recording, if you want to review it, you could do it again. You could always do it on your own. But one of the salient concepts that we've seen is that there's no inner order in the orders of the Mishnah, correct? I mean, one or two cases we would have said it's it's oversight. They didn't realize that, but it seems. Let me mute myself. Yeah, there was a question. Who had a question?
Yeah, I was gonna say something. I haven't looked into it so much, but is it true that I've seen that Rambam has an explanation for the orders of the tractates within each seder, and I was wondering what you thought about that. Is that just sort of intellectualization, or is it you think it has merit?
So when I was in yeshiva, remember that like the first commentary of Tosafot on almost every tractate, and sometimes the Talmud itself says, why are we reading this tractate following the previous tractate? And they will say this is tied to this one because of that. All of them are very forced, including Maimonides' explanations. And because even when you look at, we could look up some of those arguments, but they're tangential. They're secondary. If I want to make a text accessible to the people, because apparently that was the plan of Abu Nasi, to make sure that the knowledge will not be forgotten. So you want to present it to the people in the easiest way possible. I want to remember what comes after what. And I mean, right now, of course, the kids memorize it and they study it and they know the order of Maseder Moed is Shabbat, Eruvin, Psachim, Shkalim, Yom. They could go through it. but it is not obvious, and so it's a problem. So this big great mystery has been solved in the 19th century by, I think it was the person who addressed was Rabbi David Zvi Hoffman in the late 19th, early 20th century, saying that the answer is very simple. In most of the cases, is just organized by length. How many chapters in the tractate? So the longest tractates are at the beginning, and it goes all the way there from there in descending order. So one might say that the exception is Seder Nezikin. Remember that I showed you in Seder Nezikin there are 3 gates in the beginning, right? Part 1, part 2, part 3, and then Sanhedrin. Sanhedrin is the 4th one. So part 1, part 2, part 3, each one of them has 10 chapters, while Sanhedrin has 11 chapters. So if we follow in order, Sanhedrin would have come first, and then those 3 gates. But the names part 1, gate 1, gate 1, gate 2, gate 3 mean that at one point they were one tractate, one long tractate of 30 chapters, and then they were broken down to make it easier for people to remember and to address them. But originally they were one tractate called Tractate Damages. So that's just we did this exercise first to get to understand the structure of the Mishnah. We have 6 orders. Each order is broken to tractates, not necessarily in the same number. Most of them belong under the general category of the order, but the inner order is not specific, is arbitrary, just by length of the tractates. And now we could go and look into the text of the Mishnah. But before that, I will share this statement. It's a well-known statement in the yeshiva world, and which is that when Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi was contemplating that work of anthology, was going to put together all the oral law known in his days and organize it in the format of the Mishnah, write it down and disseminate this written form, which he did. The way he did it is still debated. Some scholars say that he wrote a master copy that people came to his base and copied from him and went back home with their own copies. Others say that for a couple of 100 years, the master copy was studied by heart. If you wanted to know the Mishnah, you would come to the school of Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi. You would memorize the Mishnah and go back home. And only hundreds of years later, they started writing copies of the Mishnah. But when the Talmud speaks about Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi's endeavor to write the Mishnah, that was done in the early 200s, so between 215 and 225 of the Common Era, or in other words, just to put it in context with what is happening in the Jewish world, in the year 34. Jesus is crucified, and Christianity begins about 30 years later or 70 years later. The temple is destroyed. Between 67 and 70 is the Great War, the Great Rebellion, and the destruction of the temple. Masada falls in the year 73. The islands of the Mediterranean and some communities in Greece and in Libya rebel against the Greeks in 112, 115. And then in 132 to 135 is the Bar Kokhba rebellion that decimated the Jewish community in Eretz Israel. So Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi writes his Mishnah about 100 years after the Bar Kokhba rebellion. Alex will go to this page in Wikipedia and see, if it holds water, according to Rambam. So Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi writes the Mishnayot after many disasters that befall the Jewish people. But at that time was already relatively quiet in Eretz Israel, very small community. The majority of Jews already live in Babylonia. And Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi says, should I or should I not write the Mishnah? And his reservation is, Dvarim shebe'al peh i ata rashai lomram bichtav. You're not supposed to write down the oral law. the oral law should remain oral. His decision to eventually write it down is based on the verse, when it is time to serve God, they violated the Torah. That is a pasuk from Tehillim, chapter 119. The original meaning of the verse is a complaint. The author complains, it is time to do something for God, but instead, they, the wicked people, violated the Torah. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi twisted the pasuk to fit his needs and said, "Ait la'asot l'Hashem, when it is time to do something for God, heferu toratecha, you're allowed to violate the Torah." So this is the argument known as the greater good. For the greater good of preserving the spirit of the text of the law, we will go against this prohibition of not writing down oral law. Why was Rabbi Yehuda Nasi concerned about writing down oral law? This is something that I've discussed in other classes. You might have heard, but I will go one because Alex brought up this issue. Alex, can you share in the chat the link to the Wikipedia page that you're looking at?
Yeah,
you put it already.
put the
Okay.
link, yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to open it and I'm going to share it and we'll scroll through it a little bit. Close this. So this is about the tractate of Toharot. So let's see, for example, here, Kelim first, as it introduces the level of impurity and dictates to which object the various impurities applies at all. To Ohalot follows because it outlines the most serious types of impurity. Negaim follows because it is next in severity and because, like a corpse, Metzorah transmits 10th impurity. Para follows as it outlines the purification for the severe impurities already dealt with. See, here already we have a problem. Para is about the impurity that one contracts from a dead body, but it comes after Metzorah that has nothing to do with para. The next stage is lesser impurities, Toharot, and their method of purification, which is immersion. Nida follows, as it is also a lesser impurity, but it has the extra feature of applying to only a portion of people. Machshirin, Zavim, and Tevulium follow Nida based on scriptural order. The next stage down is impurities that are rabbinic only. Finally, Uktzin is less, is restricted, there's no scriptural source. The law is being derived from the reasoning of the sages. Okay, here they say the Jewish Encyclopedia, on the other hand, observed that the tractates are arranged in order of decreasing length. That is a relatively new sort of piece of evidence. Means what the Jewish Encyclopedia writes. But for hundreds of years, people followed this argumentation of Rambam or others. The main flaw in the presentation of Rambam is that he mixes, just in this case, he mixes a hierarchy which is based on content with a hierarchy which is based on the scriptural order. You have to stick to one or another. If I want to organize the laws by the way they appear in the Torah, so let me follow that. What appears first? Tmemet, Metzorah, Para, whatever it is, I will follow that order. If I want to follow the order of severity, let me follow this or that order. I can't mix two different systems of organization into one. I could do one under the other. Like, for example, in the Jewish system, for libraries, right? You have general categories. In each category, you have subcategories, and those subcategories. So this is the way to organize material scientifically. We can't say, okay, I'm going to organize all the objects that I have at home. Some I will arrange by decreasing size, and others by color. Then there's no pattern for the whole system, and it's confusing. But obviously, Alex, we can go back and look at other explanations as mentioned there. You'll see that most of these arguments are restrained. Strained. So now let's go back to this question of why is Rabbi Yehuda Nasi reluctant to write down the Mishnah? Traditionally, the rabbis, the rabbis look at it and say, because we have a law that you don't write down. It's sort of like a mystical, it's a mystical statement, like a prophecy. But there is an innate reason why Rabbi Danasi was reluctant to write the Mishnayot, and this is something that we, right now, until today, we bear the consequences. Any suggestions? Why would that be a problem, writing down the oral law?
I think if it's written down, it's like it's how do you word it? It's like you can always just pull it off the shelf and reference it, just as if to not account changes that occur later on in life throughout history. So it's like it doesn't change because it's written down, and so it doesn't account for changes in reality.
Yes, Evan, what you were saying?
Will become like a Bible.
Right. So it becomes etched in stone. It becomes canonized like the Bible. You don't change a word of the Bible. You don't change a word of the Mishnah. And that was the fear of Yonasi. The oral law, by nature, is fluid. People keep adding stuff as they go, adding content as they go along, maybe dropping out stuff that doesn't belong as they go along. But once it's written, you cannot change it. And this is a problem that is really, as I say, burdening halakha until today. One very particular example is that of the contemporary judge, which I wrote about in several cases. The Torah says, if you have, one second, Netanya, I'll address that. The Torah says that if you have a question, a dispute, an argument, you go to the contemporary judge, the shofet asher yeh bayamim hahem. The rabbis raised the question: how can I go to a judge other than the judge who lives in my time and place? I can't go to anyone else. Why does the Torah say "Ela shofet asher bayamim hahem" to the contemporary judge? And the Torah answers, "En lecha ela shofet shebeyamecha." You could only refer to the one who lives in your time and place. And this is a very profound and important statement of Hazal, of the rabbis. What they say is, the only one who could understand your situation, the circumstances, the context, the problems, is a contemporary judge. We cannot expect someone who lives in the 12th century, 1st century, BCE, to understand the problems that we're dealing with today. That person can provide us insights, but not rulings. Even the Torah, that we accept the Torah as eternal, the Torah grants us flexibility, granted the rabbis some authority to address changing circumstances. And that's how it was for almost 1,500 years before the writing of the Mishnah. Rabbis and decisors and judges made decisions on their own. They did not always look for precedents. People came to court. The rabbis looked at the book. He pulled from his memory whatever he knew from oral tradition, worked the case, and produced a verdict. He didn't go to all the villages around him to say, "What did you say? What do you say? What do you say?" Right? And he didn't ask people, "What did the great-grandfather of my great-grandfather say?" It's irrelevant. I mean, unless it remained as a living tradition, it's irrelevant because things are different. But once you write the Mishnah, people got stuck in that time period of the Mishnah. This is how it is. It's like we took a screenshot, right? This would be a freeze frame and said, okay, this is what halakha is all about. Now, but the problem has been exacerbated in the last generation since the invention of the printing press, even before that. But with the printing press, it has become even more of a problem, because now you have access to all the rabbis who lived before you, to all the judges. So whereas the Torah said you go to the contemporary judge, today's rabbis say, you see all these rabbis behind me, they're all contemporary because you have their opinion. They coexist simultaneously with the living rabbis. But what it did is it really drained the authority of the living rabbis and channeled all back to those who passed away and are not part of our life and our circumstances. And that was the great fear of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. He was afraid that it was going to be taken literally as the last word, and there's no emendation or flexibility there. And indeed, the two commentaries written on the Mishnah, there were two commentaries that immediately, actually more than two, I could say three main bodies of commentary that immediately after the final editing or compilation of the Mishnah started working in motion. One is the Talmud Yerushalmi. Actually, let's start in order. The first one is the Tosefta. Tosefta is the external Mishnah. So external Mishnah traditionally is understood as the Mishnayot that did not make it into the compilation. Meaning Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi has in front of him different texts, to sometimes competing versions, and he says, okay, I will take this one, I will leave this one out. This is the ruling approach in the traditional world. In academia, it is different. We have a completely different approach to that, which I worked on with my professor. I think this is the valid approach, and that is that immediately when Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi wrote his compilation, there were other rabbis who said, we don't accept your compilation, we have our own. Right? Anyone who's in the academia or in any position of power or leadership knows that this is bound to happen, right? Someone will always come with the competing version. So there was Rabbi Hiya, Rabbi Oshaya, and Bar Kapara, three other scholars who each wrote his own version, and eventually they were merged into one, sort of hard to distinguish between them, but also because it did not have, this Tosefta did not have the official authority of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, it remained more open-ended, and people felt free to change text in the Tosefta. And sometimes they turned the Tosefta into a commentary on the Mishnah, which creates tremendous problems when we try to go back and find what is called the text, or the original text. We don't even know if there was an original text to the Tosefta as we have it today. But that was the first commentary written on the Mishnah. Less known to most people, unless you're deep in the world of yeshiva or academia. The other text, much more famous, is the Talmud, or Talmud, also known as Gemara. Some people call it Talmud, some people call it Gemara. The difference between them is this. Talmud comes from the word lamad, to learn, and is in Hebrew. Gemara comes from the word gamar, which means to learn, in Aramaic. So basically, Talmud and Gemara are the same exact thing, only one is Aramaic, one is Hebrew. But in the vernacular, the way it is used today, people say that in the Talmud is the general name, and the Talmud is made of two parts: the Mishnah, the text written by Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, and its commentary called the Gemara. So that's how people explain it today. But the Talmud itself, I mentioned three commentaries, right? So one is the Tosefta, the other one is the Talmud that is split into two branches, which we'll have to talk about. One is the Talmud Bavli, the Babylonian Talmud, which is the one everybody's familiar with. The one that people study is Daf Yomi, and the other one is Talmud Yerushalmi, or the people who want to be more accurate call it Palestinian Talmud. Was not written by Palestinians. Don't worry. It's just because at the time it was not written in Yerushalayim. It was written in the Roman province of Palestina. But in this is the English name. In Hebrew, it is called either Talmuda de Eretz Israel, the Talmud of Eretz Israel, or Talmuda Divnei Ma'arava, the Talmud of the people of the West. So we have the Western Talmud and the Eastern Talmud. The difference between them is that the Western Talmud, that of Eretz Israel, that takes the Mishnah seriously, but does not sanctify it or canonize it like the one of Bavel. The people of Bavel were removed from the time of the Mishnah, both in time and space, treated the Mishnah like a holy text, like the Bible, like Eben said. The people of Eretz Israel, who knew personally the authors of the Mishnah, treated them like humans. So the difference was that when they looked at the Mishnaic text, the people of Eretz Israel said, okay, this doesn't work out. This was not thought all the way through. So we dismiss it. The people of Bavel said, why is this word here and why is this word there? Each one, they all must have a meaning, and they worked hard to try to provide that meaning. So this is the process that was set in motion immediately after Rabbi Yehuda released his Mishnah. Nathaniel, you had a question before. Sorry.
Touched on it. And about the authority of the rabbis of the contemporary time period being affected by this process of writing down oral Torah Shabbat Peh. So it's kind of like what I was getting at, but I guess I had a question: if did the writing down of the oral law end up creating the problem it was trying to avoid, and that's what you kind of touched on. It took away because it's like you can always reference back to it. Yeah, that was it. Yep.
So it solved one problem, but created many other problems. This is, the analogy is of someone with a medical condition that is being given steroids, but then it causes heart problems and other. So it's like you solve one local problem, but then so the problem that it solved, it did preserve the knowledge that existed to the day, but it created the problem of purging out other opinions and branching off in a way that is uncontrollable. Yes, Nathaniel?
Yeah, I remembered. That's why there's so many additional attempts to write commentary or halakhic texts, because the rabbis are trying to recapture the authority that they would have had. Everybody has a halakhic text, like nowadays we have Penina Halacha, or Yochel Yosef or whatever. They're trying to recapture the authority that they could have had originally. Do you think that's why?
Yeah, definitely. What happens is that in each generation, someone comes and says, okay, there's too much knowledge, and I have to give you the authoritative, the official version of the law. And we'll see as we go, we proceed through the halachic literature, that this is exactly what Maimonides says in his introduction to Mishnah Torah. This is what Rabbi Yaakov ben Asher says in the 1300s in his introduction to the two. This is what Rabbi Yosef Karo says in his introduction to the Bet Yosef and Shulchan Aruch in the 1600s. This is what the Hafetz Haim, the author of Mishnah Berurah, says in his introduction to the Mishnah Berurah in the 1900s. And this is what Rabbi Ovadia Yosef says in his introduction to it. They all say that. There's so much knowledge, people forget, people can't learn. I will be the one who will tell you exactly what to do. So now we have about 1,000 people living today who each one will tell you exactly what to do. But I found a way, I think I found a way to address this problem. I'm working on it. I spoke with Naor about it, and since then I spoke with someone else also to sort of put it out a template. The idea is to create a wiki halacha where we'll invite authors from different denominations to make contributions, to write entries, and with the conditions that they do not criticize one another. They have to live side by side. So you open a page, like example on how to make tea on Shabbat. There are 17 opinions on how to do it, and of course one that says you should never make tea on Shabbat. And those who say we don't care if you do or you don't do. So, but that will be the way to bring back the idea of oral law that is living and flexible, because it's online. But you could always add another. I mean, yeah, there will be a forest of opinions, but each author will be hyperlinked, so you could see all of the decisions and rulings of that. Yeah, we'll work on it. It's still in the initial stages, and I have to invite authors and write myself. We'll see how that evolves. So with that, I'm going to stop the recording and see if anyone has any other questions, and we'll continue next week. Bezat Hashem.
Yeah.